What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the show. Another Friday, another episode of Why Are We Bullish? Killer panel today. One returning guest and a couple brand newbies that I'm very excited to have. Those of you that are here, you know the drill. This is live. Anything could happen. So I defer to my friend Bill here.
We'll do it live.
Okay.
We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. And thing sucks.
If you have not already, like, subscribe, share. All those things really do help get this in front of more people. And I am Ben with the BTC Sessions. This is your daily session.
Hodl the Bitcoin.
Before we bring in our guests, let's take a look at where we are in the market right now, or we'll just listen to it because I'm having that fun screen sharing problem as I've had in the past. So anyways, we're sitting at $29,833 per coin. Single US dollar will grab you 3,352 sats. 90.75% of all Bitcoin have been mined. And in terms of fees, pretty steep for next block right now, 20 sats per byte. But if you're willing to wait just a tiny bit, you could maybe eke through with 1 sat per byte. Don't count on it just in case, but just be conscious if you're setting up those lighting channels or doing some coin join or something, just use RBF if you're sending transactions as well. Always a good call. Shout out to sponsors of the show, Shakepay.com. If you're in Canada, super easy way to stack sats. You can deposit and withdraw with e-transfer. No deposit or withdrawal fees. There's a thin spread. And if you use the link down below and sign up, you spend your first $100 on Bitcoin, they'll give you $30 for free. You get the exact same deal when you use your referral link for friends and family. And on top of that, you can shake your phone every single day for free sats. Up next, we have LEDN.io. If you're unfamiliar, there is a link in the show notes, but you can use your Bitcoin for a ton of different stuff. For myself personally, it's always been incredibly useful whenever there's a cash flow issue. I need to get my hands on dollars, but don't want to sell my Bitcoin. I can deposit Bitcoin there, get a loan of dollars to my bank account within 24 hours. And when I pay back those dollars, I get back the same amount of Bitcoin. They've also got savings accounts for Bitcoin and USDC. So if you sign up with the link down below and fund your account, you can get $10 for free. On top of that, they've got their B2X offering if you're feeling mega bullish. And hey, Bitcoin-backed mortgages starting to hit the market. So check out, they're rolling out in Ontario. They're starting to look in other jurisdictions within Canada. That'll be rolled out in the soon TM. And then also soon TM would be some select US states. So keep an eye out. Things are happening and that's exciting. Probably interesting to a handful of you guys. Bitrefill.com. If you're living on Bitcoin, super easy and really helpful. You can pick up all kinds of gift cards with Bitcoin, both on-chain and via Lightning Network. You earn sats back as you shop. You can earn more sats back with your referral link. And if you're in the US and you want to get living on the Bitcoin standard, then, hey, they've started to roll out bill payments. So keep an eye out there and check them out. Keystone, another quick shout out. One of my favorite, most used hardware wallets. Air gapped, meaning you don't plug it into anything internet connected. It's all offline via QR code. And that just keeps the keys to your money away from internet connections. Awesome in a multi-sig. Definitely upgraded the Bitcoin only firmware. Links are down below. And I've done a full tutorial. And finally, if you're backing up any important hardware wallet or any Bitcoin wallet with sizable amounts in it, get it in solid steel. You don't want that seed phrase just flitting around on pieces of paper. You need something a bit more secure than that. You can grab a BillFodl over at privacypros.io. That's solid steel for the hardest money ever made. So be sure to check them out, privacypros.io. Everybody I mentioned is in the links down below. Apologies for the lack of visual accompaniment. Good old StreamYard never lets me down. Anyways, I'm going to start bringing in our guests here, and I'm very excited to have them all. So we'll say a quick hello to John, to Mario, to Colin. Welcome, gentlemen. Welcome to the show. Let's get a quick round of intros. So I'm just going to go down the line. I'm going to ask you who you are and what you do. So we'll start with John. John, who are you? What do you do?
Hey, well, first, thanks for having me. Thanks for having us. My name is John. So I'm here in San Salvador, El Salvador. I've been here since August. I'm the founder of a Bitcoin education nonprofit here. So we're called My First Bitcoin, or Mi Primer Bitcoin in Spanish. And our primary focus is just getting people off of zero with Bitcoin, right? So we do a lot of intro classes. More recently, we've started a pilot program for a Bitcoin diploma in a public high school, which is a bit more advanced. It's 10 weeks. And now we're talking with the Ministry of Education to, hopefully do it on a much larger scale next year. But we're just focused on everything Bitcoin education in El Salvador, because we believe that El Salvador is a signal. Like what happens here is gonna set a lot of precedents, and quality, independent, impartial education is what will ensure that those are positive precedents.
Awesome. Well, dude, I'm very excited to have you and chat a bit more about that momentarily. So thanks for coming. Let's jump down the line to Colin. Let people know who you are and what you do.
Yeah. Hey, Ben. Thanks so much. My name is Colin Sullivan. I am the CEO of Mint Green. Mint Green is a clean tech cryptocurrency mining company with a focus on heat recovery, largely for municipal systems. I think we basically square the toughest arguments against Bitcoin, like right in the face, and basically solve one of the biggest problems existing for the industry. So we've got a very large, for us, project coming up in Lonsdale Energy Core, which is located in North Vancouver, which should be going live 2023, providing the base load to an entire city.
That's awesome. I'm curious to hear more about that. I've done a little bit of reading on what you're doing out there, and yeah, man, it kind of flies in the face of some of the current narratives that we see. So that's awesome. Kudos to you. Let's toss it down the line, Mario, with the fantastic hair. Welcome back, man.
Thanks for having me back.
How you doing?
Doing great.
Give people an intro in case people don't know who you are.
My name is Mario Gibney. I work at LEDN, proud sponsor of BT sessions. So, man, usually I do the LEDN spiel, but you kind of did it for me already. You can deposit Bitcoin or USDC with us, earn some interest on it, or you can use it as a Bitcoin back loan. So I do work on the marketing team there. Also, just enjoy being a Twitter Bitcoin personality, coming up on 6 years now. It's been a fun journey, and that's me. Thanks for having me on. Excited to do this again. Why Are We Bullish? One of my favorite things to go on.
Yeah, man. I enjoy having you. You're always such a well-spoken, reasonable voice on the show. I enjoy it. Well, gentlemen, let's get this thing rolling. And for those people watching that are unfamiliar with the show, this is Why Are We Bullish? We go by the 3 R's. Basically, everybody's going to come with a reason for being bullish, and we're all going to get to explain that. So the 3 R's are somebody's going to give their reason. Then all together, we're going to riff on the reason, and then we're going to rotate. Really simple. Reason, riff, rotate. So I'm going to kick us off with my reason for being bullish. And it's kind of a Canadian-centric one right now. So in a roundabout way, I'm bullish on orange-pilled Bitcoiner politicians, and the reason I'm going down this route is because of the man himself, Pierre Poilievre. Those unfamiliar, he is in the running to become the head of the Conservative Party of Canada. At which point, if he were to clinch that spot, which the polls show him leading by a sizable amount right now, but it still weighs out. People, you don't get to vote on that until the fall. But that said, if he were to clinch the nomination there, then he would be in the running to become prime minister at the next election, which unfortunately in ways may not be until 2025. But I want to clarify why I'm bullish on Bitcoiner and orange-pilled politicians, because this is not me necessarily saying that I have a huge amount of faith in politicians. Not really, but I do think that orange-pilled politicians do serve a good purpose in that. I mean, my concession is that there's always going to be a politician that you hate that gets into office that does things that you're not a fan of. I see orange-pilled politicians as a time buying mechanism. A time buying mechanism before somebody gets in and is able to pass terrible legislation. So when I think of this, I think of us buying time with somebody that's favorable to Bitcoin in a way that it gives us more time for Bitcoin to become more widely understood, but also to become more ingrained with individual citizens and perhaps a little bit in our financial system, to the point where we kind of hit like a point of no return, where even if somebody were to get in office and pass really terrible legislation in regards to Bitcoin, it would be so ingrained with individuals that it would be largely ineffective, at least at a grassroots level, at an individual level. I'm also bullish on the fact that it kind of counterintuitively that here within Canada, for those unfamiliar, Trudeau, our current prime minister, who some Bitcoiners will be very familiar with kind of what happened here in the past few months regarding certain protests and everything, and then fundraising mechanisms through legacy financial versus Bitcoin, and which got to their intended recipients and which didn't. But he is effectively kind of partnered with the NDP unofficially to ensure that he's in office until at least 2025. So why I'm bullish on that is, if there was an election right now, he'd be reelected, more or less. But if there's an election after 3 years of people not having a choice whether or not he's in office, it's a bit more likely that people may be inclined to vote for an alternative. And given that he's partnered with the NDP, which is the next largest, we'll say, kind of left-leaning party that somebody who voted Liberal may consider voting for, I think if people are looking for an alternative, they may not vote for the party that helped keep them in power with impunity for another 3 years. And so I kind of see these things as perhaps coming together into a perfect storm, a very slow forming perfect storm, to form a situation where we may end up having a Bitcoiner as the Prime Minister of Canada at some point. Now, I think Bitcoin itself is largely apolitical. I don't see currently, with the narratives at play and kind of some of the misinformation around how Bitcoin functions and its net effect on society, I don't see a liberal or left-leaning person endorsing Bitcoin and being able to run on that type of a platform, at least in the interim. But I do see somebody currently in Polyev that could potentially not only lead the opposition party, but become a Bitcoiner in office leading the country. So, what do I hope will come of this? If he were to actually become prime minister, I mean, the main thing that I would be hopeful about is the tax treatment of Canada becomes like that of a currency versus, being subject to things like capital gains. That would be a huge, fantastic win for Bitcoiners if you could just earn and live on your Bitcoin and not have to be calculating every little thing. Or even if there was a concession where anything below a certain threshold doesn't trigger capital gains. That would be a really nice thing to have. I'd love to see incentives for miners, both from a renewable perspective, but also from a reduction of emissions perspective, right? Like taking methane that would have been flared and utilizing that, and thus converting it to CO2, which is not nearly as bad as methane in the atmosphere. And then like it would be really great to see Canada replace all those gold reserves that we sold and got rid of with some Bitcoin, but that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. But you know, a man can dream. So yeah, like, and apart from that, I'd like to see a slight return to sanity, and when it comes to monetary and fiscal policy, like namely that you can't print your way out of inflationary and debt problems. Like that's not necessarily a solution, and more of a focus just on general productivity rather than papering over all of our issues. So that's kind of where I'm at. I guess I'm cautiously optimistic that the circumstances that we're under right now, the economy as it is, I would say slowly growing discontent with our current government, and the potential grow of support for an individual like Poilievre could result in a Bitcoiner prime minister. And I think that would be a net positive, not just for people that lean conservative, but I think it would benefit, as I believe it would in most jurisdictions, all individuals to have a better understanding of Bitcoin. So that's where I'm at. I'm going to open it up for you guys. I know that was a bit of a long, disjointed rant on what I'm thinking, but these are just the thoughts flitting around my head right now. So I'll open it up to you guys. Maybe I'll jump to Mario first, because I'm curious your thoughts on Poilievre, his chances, and whether you even think it would be a positive thing for him to either be leader of the opposition or become prime minister at some point. Yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts, man?
Well, first I would say Colin's also another Canadian here, so he's
right. Yes,
I want to hear this as well. But yeah, I'm like, I think there's a couple ways to look at this. On the one hand, I think it's a positive effect. It kind of shows how far we've come already, that this is even something being discussed by a federal politician, and that's fantastic. You know, as you said earlier, there's got to be you know, you got to be skeptical. Like, politicians are going to say whatever they want to say in order to get themselves reelected, right? You know, so this might be like legitimately good for Bitcoin. Like, he'll get into office and could, you know, basically do his calculation that that doing things to please the Bitcoin crowd will be more beneficial to him than doing things to piss off people who dislike Bitcoin. And, you know, there's a bit of an asymmetry there, that like the people who like Bitcoin really like it, and the people who hate it, generally it's not as important a thing in their life. Like there's generally other things that they care about more than that. Yeah, the other thing I'm curious about too is like how because right now like Pierre seems kind of maximalist, not explicitly, but it feels that way, and I wonder if that's going to stick. You know, like what happens if you know, I wonder if this is going to get away from us a bit, and then we start seeing more like, oh yeah, Bitcoin's great, and so is blockchain, and so is all cryptos. You know, that would be a bit of a red flag for me, but I haven't seen a lot of that yet. So again, like I'm kind of with you in cautious optimism. The other thing I hope happens is like it would be great if we could. And like this is where I think like what Mint Green's doing is like fantastic. Is that it would be great if we could find a way to actually have this appeal to both sides of the political spectrum. Like I think. Like I think it's an improvement if at least one kind of end of the political spectrum is pushing for Bitcoin. But a great result would be is if like each party was trying to promote Bitcoin, but just in their own way, and we just kind of like that would be like the prime outcome, is if we could just have you know NDP and liberal and conservative politicians all fighting to be the party that thinks they represent Bitcoin best. Like that's what I really want to see. And you know, this is a step in the direction. It's got to start somewhere. But yeah, I mean, I'll pause there, and I don't know if Colin wants to jump in.
Yeah, Colin, what are your thoughts on?
I think Poilievre's a really interesting case. I mean, it seems oddly rare to have a politician that has like even a basic understanding of macroeconomics. He seems to have a fairly strong understanding of macroeconomics. So I'm somewhat like drawn to his knowledge base as someone who may be potentially running the country one day. But I did like what you said about how, Bitcoin just essentially needs space to grow and take hold. No politician is going to make Bitcoin anything. Bitcoin doesn't need to be made anything. It just needs that sort of time, that Lindy effect to take hold. And just basically with sunlight, it is like Bitcoin is truth. With sunlight, it will just expand and expand and expand. And the value will become very, very apparent over time. I was interesting. Mario was talking about, well, yeah, he seems very maximalist at this point. And like, that is a legitimate fear because people, it's almost like shitcoining is almost a rite of passage. Like many maximalists first got burned shitcoining and then learned why the market appreciates Bitcoin above all else. And there is definitely some efficiency in that. There's a reason why it's the biggest. It's not just the biggest. There's a reason. If you don't know why that is, you have to figure that out. And there are resources for that, obviously. It was interesting when you said, Ben, you were talking about sort of incentivization for, say, mining. We kind of went around the barn a little bit with BC Hydro recently. We haven't released anything officially on this, but it is officially a done deal. The amount is still being discussed, but we're getting support from BC Hydro in their low carbon electrification program. It's going to be north of $750K to help with the Lonzell project. And essentially, it demonstrated that we were eliminating carbon dioxide from the atmosphere at a tune of 1,800 tons per megawatt per year, as per what would be natural gas by the base load of the system. And basically took a system that's about 97% carbon reliant and turned it to about 60%. So we're about 40% green at this point for it. So they have been highly supportive. They have been very open to progressive technology. And I think that's a great sign for Bitcoin mining in general. I don't think there's a lot being done as far as solving the economic problem of electric heating. Electric heating is very expensive. If you have a low cost, if you have a green power source, it doesn't necessarily mean it's an economical source. So Mint Green can incentivize that usage and sort of make markets for that, and well as make markets for mining in general.
I hope that what's happening with BC Hydro just shows the Quebec government how stupid they were in regards to offering incentives to miners to come there and use their hydro and like offload all their excess capacity, and then be effectively just like rug pulling them and saying like, no, we're going to jack our rates and screw you guys.
Yeah, that's a really tough situation. It is a bit of a caveat. I mean, it's like, we're not just mining. I mean, there's some demonstratable, essentially like, miners are going to mine no matter what. This energy is going to get consumed. District energy is going to heat no matter what. This energy is going to get consumed and add CO2. You basically eliminate the need for one of these, and you use the energy twice in that regard. So we're looking at sort of a 96% efficiency threshold on the energy consumed to the heat sent into their system. So it's a little different than just mining on that. But yeah, they had massive amounts of power out there. I don't quite understand the politics around that. But doing business in Quebec is a little different than the rest of Canada, as far as I understand. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, Mario, you were at Blockstream. Were you there early enough to be around when that? Because Blockstream was mining a bunch in Quebec, and then I think they relocated some of their facilities because of that more or less rate rug pull.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't super involved with mining, so I don't know the details. But yeah, like when I joined, we were mining in Quebec at one point, and yeah, I believe the regulatory environment was just more favorable in the United States. So yeah, like that did happen. Like, I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't have too much to say in the details there. I was more on the marketing end of things.
Fair enough. Well, good job, Quebec. You played yourself. Well, yeah, I guess on the topic here, we'll toss it to John, because you are currently in a jurisdiction where rather than, well, I mean, you firsthand are seeing the effects of having kind of a top-down Bitcoin approach. I mean, it started very grassroots, and what you're involved in is very grassroots, kind of bottom up. But you also see the opposite side of things as well. You know, what would you say are kind of the positives versus the negatives of having a politician running a country and being pro Bitcoin? Are there negatives there? Are there positives there? What's your thoughts?
Yeah. This is, you know, as a Bitcoiner, I never expected the first country that adopted Bitcoin, it would be a top-down sort of approach, that the president would tell the people, like, Bitcoin's great, we should use it. I always assumed it would be the other way around, and I think it probably will be generally that way, right? I think El Salvador will look back on it as an exception to the rule. Although maybe not. Maybe politicians are opportunists, right? So maybe they'll start to see in other countries like, this is good for us. Too early to tell, I suppose. But yeah, in terms of the government supporting Bitcoin here, I mean,
Mario.
Yeah,
he'll be back. He'll be back. Go on, John.
I think the main positive is it's just a much easier environment to work in, right? So to have, you know, Bitcoin classes or to start a Bitcoin related project or business, you know, just there are still, El Salvador has the laws haven't necessarily caught up to the attitude of the government, if that makes sense. So it's not as smooth as it could be, but I think the idea is to make that smoother here than it would be in another place, just like the regulatory environment is more friendly. And that's a huge positive, right? That Bitcoin companies don't have to worry about, you know, just regulations and politicians and all that, which isn't really the case here. So that's a huge positive. On the downside, people associate Bitcoin, and this is changing with time, and this is one of the things that we're focused on. But there's an association with a specific political party with Bitcoin here. And I think that's problematic, right? Like, people who don't support the government, a lot of them assume that Bitcoin is bad because it's like, oh, I don't like the government. The government said they like Bitcoin, therefore I don't like Bitcoin. And I think that's one of the things that we just have to be mindful of all the time here. And like I think Mario said before about, you know, the ideal situation would be not that Bitcoin is promoted from one side of the political spectrum and the other side is like pushing against it, which is kind of sort of what happens here. Although I think the opposition is starting to come around to it a little bit here. That's the ideal is that Bitcoin, for me, I think the ideal is that Bitcoin isn't super closely tied to any political party, right? That it's not a partisan issue. I mean, maybe that's how it has to start, and that's, you know, naturally the opposition will like it or dislike it depending on what the governing party likes. But that's short term, right? Long term, whichever party adopts Bitcoin, has the friendliest attitude towards Bitcoin, I believe we'll see benefits to that. And you know, it's just a matter of time until the other party comes around to that. The faster they come around to that, and the faster they start to compete, like, hey, no, if you care about Bitcoin, vote for us for X. No. If you care about Bitcoin, vote for us for Y. The faster that happens, the better. But that might, you know, it might be like in the case of here, and it sounds like in Canada, that might not be the first thing that happens, but I think that's the ideal.
Yeah, I'd agree that. I mean, it's interesting. I'd be curious to hear why you think that it's starting to become gradually less of a partisan issue? Like, are there individuals, or like just is there a general sense of people, stepping back and looking at things and going, oh, this is equally useful regardless of who likes it? Or
Yeah, so I mean, I'm obviously a champion of education, but I do think that education is a big part of it, right? So I think in the beginning that, oh, I don't like the government, therefore I don't like Bitcoin. That's a sentiment that comes out of ignorance, right? They don't understand Bitcoin. They're making a lot of assumptions. And now that some more time has passed, maybe they've looked into it themselves. Maybe Bitcoiners have people that like Bitcoin have approached them and explained it to them. Maybe they understand Bitcoin a little bit better now. And they realize like, okay, I could dislike the government and like Bitcoin. It's not, I don't have to choose one of those. Another thing is that here, like I went to protests, there was a protest on Legal Tender Day, which was September 7th. And there were some protests like very early on that I went to. And it was a lot of hyperbole at those protests. And I think the people actually believed it, right? They believed that Bitcoin was a scam. They believed that the country was just going to lose everything, right? They believed that it was going to enable like all these narco terrorists to come set up in El Salvador. Like there was this wild anti-Bitcoin propaganda that people actually believed. And now, enough time has passed where I think people are like, okay, well, that wasn't true. So maybe I have to reevaluate my position. And I think it's just a more educated position that people have now than they did initially. It still is somewhat tied to political affiliation here, but it's less than it used to be. Like we're trending in the right direction.
yeah, and you're right. Like it's an education issue, and when you have Bitcoin front and center for a long enough time period, or not necessarily front and center, but like a visible issue for a long enough period of time, then it becomes difficult to not understand the implications. And so I was speaking to Jeff Booth recently, and he was down in El Salvador, and he spoke, and he actually went and spoke to a group of people that were very anti-government and thus anti-Bitcoin. And he kind of discussed with them. And by the end of his talk, people were starting to come around and say, okay, well, it can be useful in that sense, but you're very pro Bitcoin. What's in your opinion the worst thing about Bitcoin? And he said, in his opinion, that the worst thing about Bitcoin is that you have to be okay that the person you hate can use Bitcoin. And not only that, but the person you hate using Bitcoin makes it better and stronger for you. And that's something that a lot of people are going to have to grapple with, that even the people that you disagree with, them using Bitcoin makes it more robust for you. It makes the network more robust. It makes your money more valuable and more useful in more places. And so it's a difficult thing for a lot of people to parse, because we're so used to kind of, especially in the last however many years, this divisiveness where it's like you can't use the same thing as the people that you disagree with. Oh, well, there's this social network is for, this side of the political spectrum, and we're going to kick all these other people off. And then they're going to make their own social network. And, we need to try and stop them from having funding to that one. And, it's so this thing is mine and this thing is yours. And all of a sudden there's this global network that is everybody's. And yes, one side of the political spectrum, just probably due to nothing more than timing, leans towards this kind of open and free network.
Do you think it's timing though?
I do. I 100% do, because go back, a few decades. Mm-hmm. Go back to the time when, even go back to, I grew up in the 90s, and my impression was, by and large, that the conservatives were going to be the party that was the most prone to censorship. And I grew up with that, seeing things like, oh, they're not allowing this to be on TV or this message to be out. They're worried that video games are going to rot my brain and turn me into a crazed lunatic and gun people down. And so my thought was that the conservative side of the aisle would be the one that's most kind of stringent on limiting speech. And then I came to adulthood and the pendulum swung to the other side, and I kind of saw the opposite. And it's really just a matter of who has the most power at the most time. Both parties are equally prone to limiting ideas from the other. So I think in a different time, which I recognize that wouldn't have happened with technology limitations, but let's put that aside. If Bitcoin had sprung forth at a different point in history when civil rights movements were kind of front and center, and that was trying to be stamped down upon, Bitcoin would have been a tool for civil rights movements to make sure that their protests and everything they were doing was funded and not be able to be shut down. So yeah. I do think it's very much a symptom of timing as to which political party hones in on Bitcoin as a tool.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And an example that I would use, like a somewhat modern example, somewhat recent, but Occupy Wall Street in 2011. Like Bitcoin existed in 2011, but I hadn't heard of Bitcoin in 2011. It was very young, but I think that sentiment, like this sort of like anti-corporate, anti-bank, anti-concentration of power, had Bitcoin been a little bit more, had the network developed a little more by that point, like was it 2014 or 2015 rather than 2011, this sort of leftist movement, I think that they would have, grabbed onto that in a similar way that the trucker rally grabbed onto it in Canada, right? So I think timing isn't 100% of it, but it is certainly a factor.
And it's not to say that the opposite side of the spectrum isn't jumping onto that. So like, let's take an example of something that's at the forefront of everybody's minds right now, particularly those that would likely be on the left side of the political spectrum. Not all, but there's a lot of people that are looking at the war in Ukraine, right? And they're as Bitcoiners, we'll say the more right-leaning Bitcoiners would like to refer to the support of quote unquote the current thing. And so as much as there's a number of people that all can support the current thing, there's also a subsection of Bitcoiners that always oppose the current thing. And so that you get those polar opposite ends of the spectrum. But in that essence, I just got back from the Oslo Freedom Forum, and I was speaking with a girl who is an on-the-ground activist trying to help in Ukraine. And as things were boiling over, there was a discussion of how the hell do we get money to purchase protective equipment and get it into the country as quick as possible. And through legacy financial systems, it was going to take weeks. But they used Bitcoin, and they were able to get helmets and protective vests into the country on day 2 of the war because of the expedited nature of being able to move Bitcoin around, make those purchases. So you do see all different ways of the apolitical nature of Bitcoin. And so I do think it's a matter of time, but I do think it was a matter of timing that predisposed conservatives at this particular moment in time to gravitate to Bitcoin first.
I see what you're saying. Timing, though, I mean, like if you go down the orange pill rabbit hole long enough, I mean, what does Bitcoin do to these existing power structures, right? Like, I honestly, I think anyone who's leaning right knows that the government is not going to exist in the same form it does today if Bitcoin gets mass adoption. It's just not. The ability to gather taxes, the ability to print money and fund sort of geopolitical violence will not exist. So there's an understanding that, yeah, certain politicians on the right support it, but certain politicians are also, pro small government, that kind of thing. And you see that a little bit less on the left, along with people who just have generally more faith that the government can solve problems, which doesn't seem to be amazingly apparent the last few years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Any final thoughts? Mario, do you have anything to tag on there? We lost you for a bit, but I'm glad you're back.
Yeah, sorry, just some technical difficulties on my end. Yeah, I'm a bit more optimistic that governments, and I don't know if optimistic is the right word. I see Bitcoin having a big influence on governments, but not necessarily like changing its format entirely. I think the government's still going to be able to tax stuff, but I think more of the effects.
Is that optimism?
Yeah, maybe it's not optimism. I guess it's yeah. That's why I corrected myself in terms of like I think it's going to be less chaotic than people expect. But the way I view kind of Bitcoin self-sovereignty is Bitcoin for the first time gives you an opt-out. You don't have to keep digital dollars in a bank. You can withdraw funds and hold it yourself. And I think people are still going to use banks a lot going forward, but banks are going to have to really shape up and be a lot more effective in order to retain customers because of that. And I see governments in a similar way. I guess I'm less. I think governments are still going to be around in a very, very big way, but I think the transition is going to be a lot less chaotic. And I think just kind of people having more of an opt-out will kind of cause them to shape up. So I guess that's why I say it's I'm expecting things to be a bit less chaotic, but just more of a gradual, steady improvement. That's what I mean by optimistic.
Awesome. All right. Well, I guess we'll see. We'll find out. I mean, if Pierre doesn't clinch that nomination for the head of the party, then everything I've been saying is absolutely fucking moot anyways. So oh well. So I guess before we move on topics, I'll just make my plug. If you're in Canada and you're a Bitcoiner and you potentially want a Bitcoiner as at least head of the opposition party, then I think today is your absolute last day to get a membership to be able to vote on the leader of the Conservative Party in Canada. So you have to go to the link would be the number 4 pm.ca. If you go there, then you can buy a membership and then you'll be able to vote this September in the leadership race. But if you don't have one as of the end of today, then you cannot vote and have any influence in terms of who runs the Conservative Party. So yeah, if you're interested in that, again, I'm going to post it in the YouTube comments right now, but it's Pierre for pm.ca. So if you're in Canada and that's something that interests you and you actually like Pierre, if you don't, then disavow everything I've just said. But if that's up your alley, then go ahead. But with that, I'm going to wrap this topic. Thank you guys for indulging me in that Canadian-centric discussion there. But we did get down a little bit of a geopolitical rabbit hole as well. But we're going to rotate. We're going to jump to John here next. And I'm just going to simply ask you, why are you bullish? What has you excited right now?
Yeah. So my topic is also a little, geographic specific, but I think also could be interpreted generally as well. So because I'm here in El Salvador, what I'm really bullish about is this growing local community of Bitcoiners here in El Salvador, this bottom up sort of thing, which maybe to clarify a little bit about what has happened here. So Bitcoin Beach deserves a ton of credit for launching everything here and creating this positive example of what is possible. But it's not the whole country, right? Like that's one community within the larger country. So when the law came into effect here, this top down sort of thing, once you left that beach community, then adoption was basically zero, right? So here in San Salvador, in the capital, in San Miguel, which is kind of the major city in the eastern region of the country, it was zero, right? Like there was no adoption, there was almost no knowledge education. So it's really been built since then. And what I've seen just like in the past week, it's become very apparent to me, like how much progress we've actually made. And I think it's actually because of the bear market, right? So what we do is we have what we started with were these intro classes, and we got really good traction to begin with, and we've actually started to notice that, you know, when the price is going up, people are more interested in the intro classes. When the price is going down, they're less interested. I think that's the demographic. Like these complete beginners are the demographic that are most susceptible to the emotional swings of bull and bear, right? But we have been expanding what we offer as an educational project, and we just started a couple of weeks ago some more advanced classes about nodes and Lightning and all that. And I have been actually pleasantly surprised at how much interest we've had with those classes. Like they have been packed, they've been overflowing, and even as it seems like there's less interest in the intro classes, these are people that many of them took a class with us, some point between September and now. They took a class and they were like, something stuck with them. And then when it's like, oh, I could go a little deeper, I'd like to do that. And even with the people involved with the project. So, to clarify with that as well, I'm from the United States, but everybody else in the project is, that's working on the ground, all the teachers, they're all Salvadorians. And for, I believe, all of them, this is their first bear market, right? For the most part, Bitcoin adoption was zero in San Salvador, with some exceptions, but very close to zero less than a year ago. So this is their first exposure to the bear market. We had a meeting here where we have a new space, which is where I'm at now. We had a meeting here last night, and I was really inspired by how undeterred everyone was. We talked about like our finances are tighter than we thought they were going to be. Like this is harder than we thought. This is harder than we thought. Like the bear market has all, and they were like, well, we just have to work harder. This is really important, and like it doesn't matter. We're going to do it. We're going to continue to grow. We're just going to work harder. And I'm not sure I expected that. Like I didn't think about it, but it's been really refreshing to see that there's a real community that could, a bottom-up community that could stand up to challenges, that could stand up to obstacles, right? They're not like fair weather Bitcoiners. Like there's a real emerging community of lifelong Bitcoiners here, and that is really promising to me. And maybe another example that I could give, we had a fundraiser for our diploma program, our pilot diploma program, where we were raising 1 Bitcoin on Tallycoin for it to fund the program for this year. And we were, we started fundraising like I guess a month ago, and we did really well, and we got about 60% of the way there, and then we kind of stalled. We also stopped pushing it, but we kind of stalled at 60%. We got a big donation just a few days ago. We tweeted about it. Bitcoin Beach saw it, and they tweeted about it. Also, they donated like 1 million sats and tweeted it about it. And then a project here, somebody else here was like, "Oh, this is so great. Let's finish it off today." And I'm going to match donations for the rest of the day. And then other people came in, and this was, we had nothing to do with it. We didn't organize it. We didn't like reach out ahead of time. They didn't coordinate with each other. There were about 100 people that donated that day, right? Like just kind of there's real community support both here and abroad that is just, despite the fact that I think it's easier to see that we're in a bear market, right? It's not just this like, oh, I made some money, so I'm going to be generous. It's like, no, I lost some money, but this is important. So it's just this is when there's less noise and more signal, I think. And I'm just really bullish because the top-down approach is temporary, right? That won't work on a long time frame if we rely on that, because presidents change, right? So a new government could come in that doesn't support it, and if there is no base at the bottom, then it will go away. So now we have to build. I think it's important that we build this base that it doesn't matter who the president is. It doesn't matter who the governing party is. And I think there was a little bit of a danger that we would over rely on the top here. And what I've seen just in the past week is, as I think Bitcoiners should, if we believe in something, we should do it ourselves. And that's what I'm seeing here, that it doesn't matter who the next president is, who the next governing party is here, that there will be this significant Bitcoin community, and this is not going away. This is not going to change with the government. This is here to stay.
I love that you zeroed in on the fact that in the bear markets, that's kind of where you see shit actually get done, and the learning happens, and the people that what I'm interested to see in particular is the people that are coming in and learning, in particular with things like My First Bitcoin right now. Those people that are taking that time to learn and save and have that attitude of, well, it's more difficult now than we thought it was going to be, but let's just put our heads down and be productive and build. Those people are going to be, I feel like they're going to see the benefits of that like they may have never seen in their lifetimes. Give them a few years. And it's going to be a pretty stark contrast to things that were possible in that country prior. And it's going to take a little bit longer for people to kind of understand the implications of that, and also have that low time preference of, there's kind of these ebbs and flows to Bitcoin in these early stages of, sometimes it's going great and sometimes it's getting pretty pummeled. But if you do have the disposable income, which I know is very limited in El Salvador, but if you're putting away just a tiny bit, or if you're trying to be as productive as possible and delaying gratification, if you've got that kind of longer time horizon in front of you, then the benefits to you can be pretty incredible. I'm curious to see if that experience for people in El Salvador is starkly different from people in a developed Western nation, because the average person that buys a little bit of Bitcoin in Canada, for example, they've got a few $100 of Bitcoin, and then they find a few years later it's worth like $1,000 or $2,000.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm gonna go buy a TV or something. If I haven't done my research, I'm gonna go buy a TV. But in El Salvador, does that have a material difference on somebody's day to day if they've saved a little bit and all of a sudden they actually have meaningful savings a few years down the road?
Yeah, and what is meaningful savings is different depending on the specific place, right? So what you wouldn't consider meaningful savings in a developed Western country, you might consider that same amount meaningful savings here. And it's also it creates the possibility of saving, which didn't exist for the majority of the country. 70% of El Salvador is unbanked, right? And it's not I don't think the most important thing is how much purchasing power they have in the future. It's the fact that it's a mental shift to think about the future, right? So like one of the major problems here is gang violence. And the school that we're working in San Marcos, which is a suburb of the capital here, it's a socially vulnerable area, and gangs have a significant presence, like literally at the gates of the school. And the director of the school told us that 29 students dropped out in a 2-month period this year to join gangs. 29 of just a few hundred, like it's a significant percentage. And they do that for economic reasons, right? They are not joining gangs because it's a good career move. They're joining gangs because they need money today, tomorrow, $5 or $10, not a huge amount. They need money right now. And they don't have, again, 70% of the country being unbanked, and especially people that are vulnerable to gangs, which tend to be younger people. The number would be even much higher than that. They have a very short time preference, right? They're just thinking today, tomorrow, next week. They're not thinking next year, next decade. And I think Bitcoin, beyond purchasing power, it allows people to ponder the future. And I think that's a really important mental shift. And people that are in it now in the bear market that are getting involved with Bitcoin, I think are just the sort of people who are thinking about the future, right? Like they're not like, oh, the price of Bitcoin is, everybody's saying the price of Bitcoin is going to double in the next month, which is what people say in a bull market, right? And that brings in a different sort of demographic. But the people getting involved now in El Salvador and around the world, but what I'm seeing here in El Salvador are people that have a long time preference, and I think that time preference is just is paramount. Like that's just really important. Also contextual here. One of the things that resonates with people here are that more so, I'm from New York, more so than people I know in New York, is Bitcoin as a tool for empowerment, right? In New York, most people that I know that bought Bitcoin, they wanted more dollars at the end, right? They wanted to buy Bitcoin and in the future sell it for more dollars, which I think misses the point, but that's probably a different discussion. They're not worried about like, oh, well, the government's going to limit my speech. They're not going to let me donate to X or Y. But here, there's people from Venezuela. There's people that fled Nicaragua and Venezuela that live here, that work on the streets. And it's like, that is an example that is very present for people, that Bitcoin as a tool, like censorship resistance, right? Like that means more to people here than it does in New York, for example.
Yeah. Mario, Colin, do you have any comments, questions, anything for John?
I think what John's doing is amazing down there. I think education is absolutely paramount to the growth of Bitcoin. And, as he was talking with the political issue with it, it was more of an understanding of the technology than anything else. But I mean, I am extremely humbled and envious of you being able to be there on the ground and do this. I mean, that's exactly, what any Bitcoiner should aspire to do. I think, I will always take the time when someone reaches out to be like, how do I buy a Bitcoin? How does Bitcoin work? Doesn't matter who you are. I will take the time. My board tells me to stop doing that. I'm not going to. But no, I think it's awesome. And I think it's very important for these places that maybe didn't have the exposure or were unbanked before. There might be a lot of lacking fiscal education. And this can really help jumpstart that. It's almost strange how like the average Bitcoiner knew exactly what was going to happen with inflation 2 years ago. And, you can debate whether the economists were wrong or were lying or what, but the general population did not think this was going to be an issue. But we knew it because we understand money. And to understand Bitcoin, you must first understand money. So that type of education is critical. in a transitionary period like we are right now.
Mario, I'll toss it to you, and any final comments that you may have, but I'm going to let you transition into your topic for being bullish when you see fit. But do you have any final thoughts for what John was talking about?
Not bad, man. It's doing great work down there, and I love being a listener on stuff like this. And I got there's so many different like aspects and kind of dimensions in which people can work on this industry, and it's really cool seeing what part of that what part of it you're chipping away at, and it's keep it up. As for why I'm bullish, I think this is my third time on this segment, right, Ben? And I realized the last couple times I did very kind of like in the weeds, kind of technical stuff, and this time I was like, I want to find something simple, like price or something adjacent to it, and
because the price is going to double in a single month.
I'm bullish on the dominance index, which is a bullshit indicator, but it's still directionally correct. And I'm bullish on that because like in the last month or so, I've had like a couple of individuals come to me and saw kind of what happened with like Luna and UST and like a few of the other market downturns. Every time something like this happens, all the alts crash more. And I'm bullish on the several new Bitcoin maxis that were minted. The fact that kind of people learn when this stuff happens and they see that, Bitcoin is less affected, and kind of, I think a few more people learned their lesson each time, and, had like at least two friends of mine and a coworker kind of be like, yeah, I kind of get it a bit more now. And, I saw lots of reports of this on Twitter. You never know, like some of it's anecdotal, but it's still an encouraging thing to see. And we got the Canadian Bitcoiners in the chat here. They're reminding me I'm bullish as well because I just ran into them in a bar downtown Toronto. I dipped out to have some food with a coworker of mine, and there was Joey and Len for the Bitcoiners podcast, just in my usual haunt. So I figure that's a sign from the heavens of some kind. But I know there's a lot of. There's always like, I mean, these kind of periods of downturn, the kind of bear markets, it's like, honestly, I like them better in a lot of ways just because they separate the mice from the men, the wheat from the chaff. It's like, the people who have the long-term vision and who kind of are in this for, the long haul really tend to stand firm and kind of get to build solid foundations for when things get frothy again. And it's been encouraging.
I echo you. The newly minted Bitcoin only or Bitcoin maxis or whatever vernacular we're going to go with here. But basically, the long and the short of it is people learn when they are around for long enough. Many people learn, not all. There's some,
more bit by bit.
But the people that take the time, I mean, I was very encouraged this time around to see a good number of people come into the space during a bull market and very quickly, in very short order, go Bitcoin only in a bull market, which is a difficult thing to achieve. But I think that speaks to the quality of kind of messaging around Bitcoin and what it's for and why it's here and why it's different. So, I mean, that was a kind of a unique thing that I noticed this bull run that I didn't really notice in 2017. I don't even think that, Bitcoin maximalist was a known term back then, let alone were there a lot of people of that persuasion. But it seems to be a more known thing. And man, are we learning some lessons this time around. I was a little worried because we were a little thin on the destruction of a bear market this time around. But
it might not be over.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, it might not. And I do think it would be.
This is a bullish discussion, Mario.
Yeah, yeah.
This is long-term bullish.
Yeah,
This is
this is low time preference. Why are we bullish? I do think it would be beneficial to really wash out some of the riffraff here. Um, I wouldn't be opposed to seeing a little bit more decimation. Like if it doesn't happen, so be it. But like, I'm kind of
Listen, Luna was the worst, like the worst instance of wrecked in the entire history. It makes BitConnect look like, you sunk a rubber ducky in a bathtub. Like that market cap destruction was unbelievable. I feel horrible for the people who were involved. But I mean, like, how does it get worse than that?
So the thing
don't
is,
tempt him. Don't tempt him.
how does it get worse than that? I mean, okay, so
I thought
the merge. Oh God.
yeah, well, yeah. This is the thing that I'm kind of waiting for, is for Ethereum to get washed out quite a bit more. So I'm looking at things and I want, and I think it's in the midst of happening, but I want even Ethereum in its #2 spot to start reflecting the chart of something like Litecoin a little bit more. And Litecoin was long touted as the silver to Bitcoin's gold, and it's it was kind of like the next best thing, and everybody got excited each bull market because it would pump. But if you do the Litecoin versus Bitcoin chart, it's just a very volatile path to having less Bitcoin, right? And each kind of market, each explosion in Litecoin, it subsequently hit lower highs versus Bitcoin. And when you look at kind of our traditional previous 4-year cycles, each cycle you would see Litecoin hit about half of its previous all-time high versus Bitcoin, while still attaining new highs in dollars. Mm-hmm. And people, like most people, were pricing in dollars for years and years. And then it started to become a bit more prevalent to say, well, yeah, but what if you just held Bitcoin and did away with the bullshit of trying to trade in and out, ignoring the fact that you're incurring capital gains swapping from coin to coin, but just looking at the straight, what if I just held Bitcoin? If you're still wrecked, then that becomes a pretty glaring issue there. So, this past bull market, Ethereum hit about half of its previous all-time high versus Bitcoin. It was, I think the previous all-time high was around 0.15. This time was around 0.08. I'd like to see that come down considerably from where it is right now, which is, is in the 0.06 range. I'd like to see that have a little bit of a trail off more from here, which would probably need to see Bitcoin bleed a fair bit more to see Ethereum do the same and more. But I think that's kind of the missing piece of the puzzle. Yeah, Ethereum's down considerably from its all-time high versus Bitcoin, and 25% from its all-time high versus Bitcoin this cycle. But I think it needs to bleed a little bit more than that to really kind of cement in the fact that Bitcoin is kind of the de facto. Is that going to happen? I don't know. But, I wouldn't see more pain as a bad thing. And I think long term, it would be bullish, and it would further contribute to Mario's reason for being bullish, which is maximalists being vindicated and minting more maximalists. So I don't know. John, Colin, thoughts on that further?
Yeah, well, I think one of the great things about Bitcoin is it encourages personal responsibility, and sometimes you have to feel a little bit of pain to learn a valuable lesson, and I think maybe that's what we saw with with Luna, right? Like in a bull market, people don't do the proper research. They just jump onto things. And that's a bad idea. And a lot of people know that now.
I think, you're talking about more of a bleed out from Ethereum. I don't see it as a bleed out. I feel like the dev team is a little blasé on taking on a lot of technical risk. I think that you're going to see something similar to Luna where an exploit is found in some ways, and it just sort of cracks it. Because the types of things we're trying to do with a system that, like, although flawed, is like kind of running, is bizarre to me. To do away with POW, I mean, they're arguably the second most secure network in the space. To just throw that in the trash is shocking. So I think it's going to be something, that it's going to be a self-inflicted wound rather than sort of a market indifference towards them, like with Litecoin. It's interesting though, like you can say that story with Litecoin, but you get someone to glom onto a meme coin, another script algorithm coin like Doge, and things can change drastically for those things. So yeah, it's interesting to look into that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think that Ethereum is walking a very dangerous line right now. And we'll see what happens in August if they actually go through with the merge. But I mean, it's going to be largely untested when they go to it. And there are very smart people attacking these networks 24/7.
Yeah. The merge will be interesting. Excited to see the splurge, though. That's going to be an exciting moment, I think. That's let's move on. Holy shit. Okay. so Mario, thank you for your reason. I very much appreciate it, and it's a good one, of which I've previously spoken about as well. But we're going to jump to our last reason. So, Colin, you are up. Please enlighten us. What has you bullish, man? It's your time.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm incredibly bearish. I mean, only small countries are now adopting Bitcoin. So, I mean, like, what does that mean? Like the amount of cope you hear from no coiners about that is so absurd. I mean, you couldn't contemplate a country adopting Bitcoin 4 years ago. Now, we have obviously El Salvador. We're looking at Central African Republic has adopted it. We had 44 countries and central bankers meeting in El Salvador to discuss the adoption of Bitcoin. That is like 25% of all the countries in the world. Yeah, they're small countries. Yeah, they are affected by inflation worse than anyone else. They maybe have been dollarized. They maybe are suffering very hard from inflation from their own currencies. So it makes sense that they would come to this first. But I feel like we'll almost be in a situation where the last countries may end up first and the first countries may end up last. El Salvador could very quickly become the Singapore of, Bitcoin. And I can see this happening on an adoption cycle within the decade. We're seeing this question is so hard to tackle because from so many angles, it is so obvious the answer is Bitcoin. From a macro perspective, you're seeing, inflation numbers bigger than expected. Oh, I was wrong. I mean, this is leaning towards hyperinflation. Is not going to get better when you have a conflict and the U.S. is using the literal function of money as a shield to try to debase, say, another country, another power. That just really, when you can't have a neutral base for exchange, it just takes air out. Its use case dies, right? So it's the U.S. probably stopped being the global reserve currency when they look back in history books around in February when they said, okay, well, we're going to freeze all the assets from Russia. Like this is a golden goose. They choked it out. I mean, if I were to go a step further, it was very, very hard as someone who often stares at charts in their free time to assess this market because we're used to a blow off top, right? And I feel like this time we had like a volcano blow off top. I've designed a very beautiful graphic for you right here. So this is a volcano blow off top from El Salvador, and you can simulate the top was right here, but we lost it. And if you look at this, we're basically in a bear market for about a year. We just didn't know it yet. which was essentially the bottom of the 2017 peak, was about a year out. So if these cycles maintain, thank you. I'm glad you like that artwork.
I think
It's beautiful.
We need a chart, and somebody needs to, like, that's going to replace the BART. The BART. That's somebody needs to stick a fucking volcano in the middle of a chart. I think
that's volcano mining. It's it's getting a little ahead of itself there, showing us how it works. And we bottomed out 3,500 last time. I think if you looked at Bitcoin, has never touched another halving cyclical top. If you consider all the QE that's happened, we're very close to 20,000 USD value in 2017. There's not much air down there. So I'm very optimistic we'll start that we have bottomed, and we'll start to see it turn around as we can near the next halving.
But you said a lot of things, but the chart was really all I needed to see.
Yeah, I know.
That was the highlight for me.
A picture is worth 1,000 words. That one might have been worth more.
It's Mario. I'm gonna pass it to you. Do you have thoughts on?
I just gave my thought on it. It was a convincing picture. I'm like, I don't know. I'm scared now. I gave you a simple like price related metric, and now I gotta say confident things about price. I want to see the volcano replace the BART. That's my take on this.
Let's make it happen.
It does feel like an oddly muted. Like it doesn't feel like we got the excitement or the pain of the last cycle, because like that was pretty distinct. And I my journey into Bitcoin was the beginning of the pain of the 2014-15 bear market. So like I came in like after the blow off top, and then proceeded to watch like 80% of Bitcoin's value evaporate over the next calendar year. And then effectively, I got to watch the entirety of the run up in 2017, and then the entirety of the 80% drop in 2018, 2019. And so like there hasn't been nearly the extremes that we felt in previous markets. Like what do you think is contributed? And it's funny because like on the outside looking into the people in traditional markets, they're like, oh my God, look at the insanity. And they're quoting dollar figures of the up and down. And we're like, it's only
20%. My God.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I got something to say. What you're basically describing is a reduction in volatility, which is actually like exactly what you'd expect as the aggregate size of Bitcoin grows, and it's going to need to happen if it's going to fulfill more and more use cases. So yeah, I mean, like the less the less extreme these swings become, and the more kind of steady things become, the more use cases it can fill. That's great.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I think that it's a sign of a maturing market for sure. I mean, they understand sort of the trajectory where it's going. You're going to see less and less volatility over time. The halving literally functions with less and less effect, like in a supply way. I mean, like the amount of coins that's dropping is getting less, and so you can see that kind of maybe a muted top is part of that. I know that Mario and myself kicked around, efficient market hypothesis type stuff in the past. And I mean, eventually, all these things I believe will be priced in. We're not quite there yet, but the market is getting savvier to how the ebbs and flows of this goes. And you're going to see, less money to be made on both ends, I think. But there is still tons and tons of upside, I believe, through the 2020s.
As long as we agree that halvings are priced in, I'm good.
Which one?
Halvings will be priced.
All of them. Every halving, all the way to the end.
It's funny because obviously the halvings played a major role early on, but now it's such it's a diminishing metric, right? Like going from 50 to 25 coins every 20 minutes or every 10 minutes was a major effect on the, you know, as much as I hate to use the term stock to flow ratio early on.
That's a dirty term now, isn't it?
It is. It is. It's
Listen,
a shame.
that guy was right for a long time, like scary right.
Well, that
Oh
guy
my
was
God.
right.
Are we going to have this conversation? Are we really going to do this?
That guy was right if he kept his first model.
Was it? Okay.
He was dead on if he kept his first model, but I think he got ahead of him.
But again, listen, like Mario, we're arguing the same side of a different coin here. I'm
having a laugh, man.
I'm basically saying that the market was inefficient. It's becoming more efficient. Stock to flow can only exist in a market that doesn't know what's going on. It's like it's using game theory. It's trying to figure out what the price for it is. It doesn't quite know what the commodity is yet. I think the world is starting to understand what Bitcoin is, and then as soon as it sort of starts to, that model falls apart a little bit. I think we'll see sort of like a gradual melt up and sort of less, halving based boom and bust cycles.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and you know, Ben's point is spot on that, like, you know, going from like, you know, 10% inflation down to 5% in like one of the early happenings is, you know, way less of a big, you know, dip from like where we are now, which is like between 1.5% and 2% price inflation to, you know, be like, you know, a bit less than 1. So yeah, it's gonna all just steadily smooth out.
It seems like the major impact on the price is shifting from just pure reduction of issuance to people getting it. The major factor now is how many people understand Bitcoin and how much capital do those people have. So either you know, the two main things are the people with the most capital that are trying to preserve purchasing power, understanding that Bitcoin can't be debased, or large swaths of people understanding that Bitcoin can't be debased, or large swaths of people needing Bitcoin to elude draconian capital controls or things like that. So it's become less about just the inherent properties of the protocol and more about people understanding the inherent properties of the protocol. That's going to be the main driver of the sticker price of Bitcoin. At this point.
Ben, when you said, you know, people who have capital, I was in an elevator at Consensus New York 2018, a very depressing 2018. And there are some guys that are saying, what if one billionaire just invested in Bitcoin? And now it's like, which billionaire hasn't invested in Bitcoin? Like it's like the paradigm on that has totally shifted. And you're just going to see, I think, more and more of that, particularly when people are looking places to park their money in a very inflationary environment.
Mm-hmm. And I think another change from past cycles is I don't think there's too many serious voices that are saying that Bitcoin won't exist in the future, that it will go to zero, that it will be replaced, which was, you know, in 2014, 2015, that was absolutely the narrative. You know, as a Bitcoiner, then even I had some doubts, like, is this going to make it? I thought that it would, but like, I wasn't, you know, I wouldn't bet my life on it. Right. And there was a little bit less in the last bear market. And this time that's just not, I don't think anybody could seriously claim that now. And that's just another, you know, metric of the maturity that's happened.
Yeah, there's very few people that are convinced that it's going to zero. It's like Peter Schiff and Dan Pena. Like those are the two. Fucking zero. I don't know if you guys have seen that.
You know, Schiff doesn't even believe that. That's just all for clout, right? Like his son's big into Bitcoin. Like I guarantee he has some. But I mean, it's his job to shit on Bitcoin.
Do you think he's just so stubborn that and his business is predicated on the fact that he doesn't understand Bitcoin? Like, do you think there's a genuine in his mind concession that like, hey, this is probably going to be around for a long time and is probably like in the realm of like being having the same purpose as gold? Or do you think he genuinely, just his brain has precluded him
Just
from
calcified.
Yeah.
I think he likes that we're talking about him now, and that's why. Right? Like, if he wasn't, like, Bitcoin's going to zero, we wouldn't be talking about him now. If he bought Bitcoin, then he would kind of move to the background. I think he likes that we're talking about him now. I think that's the motivation.
Yeah, I think it's a brand. I mean, maybe I've never met Peter. I can't say too much about him, but like the people he's been in front of, the people he's debated, I mean, he's been able to get a lot of probably hard questions answered. You know, if he's a reasonably intelligent guy, I think he actually is probably just LARPing as a Bitcoin hater.
Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, my guess is even if he is, we'll never know, right?
Yeah.
He'll just continue on. And if he sees value in Bitcoin, he'll just funnel capital through his son, and the inevitable formation of shift sats. Is that like it's going to be a company that happens? Clearly, Shift Sats needs to be created as a direct competitor to Shift Gold. I don't see how his son could not create that company. I'm just saying, I want some royalties, Spencer. This is trademark Shift Sats.
I like that.
Gentlemen, I'm going to start rounding it out here. But before I do, I'm going to get you to start brainstorming now, because I'm going to recommend, first of all, I want any final thoughts from any of you, anything that you didn't get to say, anything you think that you'd like to reiterate, whatever. But then I'd also like to challenge you to recommend a piece of content, whatever that may be. It could be an article, a book, a video, a podcast, something that's been beneficial to you in your learning curve in and around Bitcoin, or something tangential to Bitcoin that you'd like to recommend. Really anything, any piece of content that you think could be useful for people watching right now. So my general final thoughts in regards to my topic earlier, again, if you're in Canada, if you think that Bitcoin in general is beneficial to residents of Canada, for them to learn more about it at the very least, and have it be a front and center issue, and you'd like to have a hand in helping that forward, then perhaps you might consider getting a membership and voting for Pierre to be the head of the Conservative Party of Canada. If so, again, I'll drop it in the comments here, but it's Pierre, the number 4 pm.ca. And then you can get a membership and help vote him in. And to clarify, I don't think that anybody should put too much stock in politicians. I'm cautiously optimistic on this, but I think politicians can be, as they should be, tools.
Stop there.
Yeah. Sorry?
They're tools.
Yeah, tools. They should be tools of their constituents as a means to an end. And I view them as potentially a way to put enough time and space between the public at large understanding Bitcoin and its benefits to all, and the eventual terrible legislation that could be brought forward. I'd like to delay that type of stuff as much as possible, because eventually some guy's going to get in and he's going to realize that Bitcoin prevents or drastically impedes his ability to print the money necessary for the thing he can't get funding through via taxes. So, if that's important to you, then maybe consider supporting Pierre Poilievre. Potentially. In terms of pieces of content that I would like to recommend, I'm going to recommend, and hopefully I can find it, and I won't be able to bring it up right now, unfortunately, because I can't share my screen. But I recently added, or I've got an old phone, and I decided to add Calyx OS, which is a privacy-centric operating system for your phone. And so I went ahead and added it, and so it's like you take an Android phone and you flash it with a de-Googled operating system. And I was able to get a bunch of different apps on it and everything. I've got Zeus, so I can interface with my Umbra Lightning node. I've got Samurai Wallet, so I can interface with my Ronin Dojo and do mixing on the fly. So I recommend you checking that out. But in particular, there's a YouTuber, and don't mind me, I'm just gonna pull up his video here. So sorry for the audio, but his YouTube channel is called Side of Burritos, which is just a great name for a YouTube channel. But he provided a very in-depth tutorial on how to install Calyx OS on an Android phone. I was originally going to make a video on this, and then I realized I don't need to, because this guy's run through of how to do it was flawless. So I just dropped that into, hopefully, yeah, I just dropped that into the chat there. If you're interested on flashing Calyx OS onto an Android device for a more privacy-centric experience, then go ahead and do that. Check out that YouTube video. I'm using a Mac to do it. I know a bunch of people in the chat are, you're not on Linux? Oh, come on, man. Dude, I'm doing audio and visual.
Hey, guess what, everybody? I just moved from Linux to Mac like 2 days ago.
People are like,
that happened. Actually, yesterday, literally yesterday.
Yeah. It's so the thing is, if you're doing AV stuff, if you're trying to do video editing and everything, it's a fucking nightmare if you're trying to do it on Linux. Like, it's just, I want to be able to, and of course, as I say that, my camera cuts out. But that's just because my camera battery, which is not hardwired, just cut out, and I'm literally replacing it as we speak. But nonetheless, it's a nightmare on Linux to do it. So regardless, I for my mobile experience, I'm tinkering with Calyx OS and a more privacy centric experience, and so it was fun flashing this, and this video was incredibly useful. So, anyways, check it out. I just dropped it in the comments there. But again, if you're watching this later or listening to this later, just search up Side of Burritos on YouTube. He has only got like 5,000 subscribers, but he's got some very, very useful tutorials there in regards to this kind of stuff. And I value that. So thanks, man. Thanks for making that video. And I'm going to step aside. I'm going to let everybody else have their final say. So I'm going to jump to John. 2 questions of you. Any final thoughts on anything said today or anything that you missed, and a recommendation of a piece of content you'd like to send people to?
Yeah, so just to reiterate, El Salvador is a signal, right? I think there's a lot of noise in Bitcoin. What's happening here is a signal, and I believe, there's a lot of speculation which is going to be the next country to adopt Bitcoin. And I don't think it matters, because if we do it well here, everyone is next, right? That's why it's so important what happens here. And then in terms of something to recommend, my first thought was actually the white paper, the Bitcoin white paper. I think that's probably, as time progresses, there's less and less people that read that as they get introduced to Bitcoin. And it's a great document, and maybe it doesn't matter that if it's 5 years old, 10 years old, 20 years old, like that's always going to be super relevant. But if I could steal a second one in there that is even older than the white paper, pre-Bitcoin, way pre-Bitcoin. Then I would say the essay "Civil Disobedience" by Henry David Thoreau, and I think that's important, and that's what attracted me. That the same sentiment is what attracted me to Bitcoin. The sentiment being that if you believe there is something wrong, like if you oppose a system, the most effective way to fight it isn't actually to directly confront it. It's to create something better that makes the old paradigm irrelevant, right? And I think that's what Bitcoin is, right? We don't have to fight the system. We just have to show that there's a better alternative. And I think that's a lesson that my first exposure to that was Henry David Thoreau, Civil Disobedience. It's an essay. It's fairly short. I think it's like 20 pages or something. It's well worth reading.
I enjoy that. I'm gonna drop the link to that in the chat right now as well. I haven't read it myself, so that's what I'm gonna do right after this. Awesome. Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that. Let's do a little rotation to Mario. Final thoughts, recommendations. You're up, man.
I got to plug my podcast. Forgot to say that early on, the Unhashed podcast. If you want, Bitcoin technical talk and some, shit posting in verbal form, it's a good place for it. And I want to get a shout out to Murch on Twitter, MURCH. He's been answering questions about Bitcoin Stack Exchange for like 10 years. He's like replied to people like thousands of times on there, and he's just wonderful personality and packed with just like really interesting shit. His Twitter feed is great. He does these like mempool like weather reports and he's one of my favorite follows, and he deserves some more love.
I love that, showing up the Bitcoin plebs that are, and this guy's been around for a long time, right?
I wouldn't call him a pleb. He's an OG dev. He's great.
That's awesome. Well, yeah. What's his handle at?
Merch and Damas. I'll shoot it to you so you can share.
I'm gonna see if I'm already following him. Oh yeah, I follow him. There we go. I will. There is his Twitter link in the chat right now. Awesome. I love that. Let's rotate one last time. Colin, final thoughts and recommendations. You're up.
Yeah, I just want to say that, energy use onto itself is not a moral hazard. It's a sign of an advanced society. Energy is going to be consumed more and more over time. That's, basically, a sign of a society growing and improving. There is no substitute for POW. POS is basically, we're already in that system already. I mean, it would be a petrodollar system, just slightly different if we move to POS. However, it can be done better. And I think over time, Bitcoin mining will be trending towards secondary uses for heat like mint green, waste energy uses with Crusoe and others who are using the flare gas and making, different markets more robust as far as their electrical infrastructure goes. So there's a lot of good that comes out of Bitcoin mining. And it's the only way to sort of separate ourselves from the existing system without partaking in it. With some sort of military enforcement. As far as like reading goes, it's John kind of stole my thunder there. I really was going to say the Satoshi white paper. I think going back to it pretty regularly is important. It was written for a world that does not know what Bitcoin is. It's not like some of these more complex coins that have come out and you read their white paper and you have to have this huge knowledge, a backstory of how all these blockchains function. It's actually written quite simple, 8 or 9 pages of writing, some math in there, but it's highly approachable. And I think anyone who, is going on YouTube, going on Reddit, listening to, say, the news, reading Forbes is going to have a distorted view of actually how it functions. If you go right to the source, you can extrapolate exactly how it is, apolitically, non-sensational, just get it from the horse's mouth.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I love that. Yeah. Funny enough, it took me a little while to actually read the white paper. Like it wasn't when I first got into Bitcoin. I was looking at videos and looking at message boards and things like that, and I didn't actually immediately go to the white paper. So if you're watching this and you haven't read it, it's not that intimidating of a read. It's definitely worth like just going back to the beginning and just seeing what started it all. Like,
yeah, I think that's the genius of it, is that it's addresses very complex topics, but in a way that is digestible, right? Like you don't have to be an expert in a variety of fields to understand it. Like it's pretty approachable.
Yeah, I'd agree. And again, like if you don't get everything there, that's okay. Like you'll absorb a couple things, and then maybe from reading it, you'll have a few questions. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Asking questions, that takes you down different rabbit holes. So yeah, the consensus is read the white paper if you haven't already. Not written by Craig Wright, by the way. I'll leave that there. Gentlemen, I will say one last time, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate all of your time. Everybody watching, of course, all of their Twitter handles are linked in the show notes, so go give them all a follow, as well as everything that they are working with. So John with My First Bitcoin, Mario with LEDN, and Colin with Mint Green. Check them all out. Follow them, and you'll be able to find everything else that they're working on. Gentlemen, you're all welcome back anytime. Thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks so much, Ben.
Cheers. Thanks, guys. Awesome. And everybody watching, thank you guys for being here. Thank you for spending part of your Friday evening with all of us. Of course, if you haven't already, smash that like, subscribe, share button. All of that stuff really does help. Thank you guys that have been doing it regularly. I see you. I see when you do it. I see the likes, I see the subscribes, and I see the shares. And it is very important. So thanks a lot, genuinely, for that. Of course, if you want to help the show in another way, you can hit up the previously mentioned sponsors down below: Shakepay, LEDN, of course, Mario here from LEDN, Bitrefill, Keystone, BillFodl. They're all linked down below. And if you really liked what you saw, you can always hit me up with a Bitcoin tip at my Strike page. That's strike.me/BTC sessions. You get there, you can type in any amount you want. You hit the tip button, and you either see a Lightning invoice, or if you tap to the arrow to the right, it'll just be a regular Bitcoin QR code. With that, I am out. Have yourselves a wonderful day or evening wherever you may be. See you guys next time for your daily session.
HODL the Bitcoin.